Welcome to Coffee and Careers. As most of you know, transitioning out of academia and getting into the industry can be especially challenging. So theory and action are often two completely different things. And today, Dr. Casey Bradley has invited two experienced ag professionals to give us insight on how to have a successful farm call or a technical farm visit. So today we are joined by Dr. Jim Smith of Kent Feeds and Steve Fitzner with Kalmbach Feeds. Jim is a senior swine nutritionist with Kent Nutrition Group. So he works with customers and offers advice on which products are best to use with their production systems. He also provides input for research and works together with product development. So Jim holds a PhD in swine nutrition from K-State and has dedicated his career to the feed industry. He's held several positions in both the ingredient and finished feed side of the business. And he's also an active member of the Research and Education Committee for Indiana Pork. Steve Fitzner is a seasoned sales nutrition professional. Steve Fitzner is a seasoned sales professional with a background in both supplier as well as direct-to-farm sales. He received his BS from Michigan State and also worked briefly in beef cattle before returning to school to complete his MS at Western Kentucky University. So Steve's worked for big companies like Kalmbach Feeds, Fibro Animal Health, Prince Agri Products, and also Steve owns his own retail feed business. So hi, Jim. Hello, Steve. Good morning. And thanks for joining us today.
Morning.
All right. So I'm going to stop sharing. Jim, if you want to go ahead and pull up your slides. And we're like I said, we're going to start out with Jim Smith and then we'll go over to Steve. So listen, students, we have a monogastric and a ruminant specialist on board today. So, and I probably need to give you permission to share your screen.
You read my mind.
Yep. And so I love the fact that Steve's joining us from the car because, as you know, when you do a lot of sales, that's where you live primarily. So,
very good point.
Casey, do you see my slide?
We do. Yep.
All right, great. Well, Casey, thanks for the invitation and Trish for the introduction. I was pleased when I got the invitation to share a little bit of what I do as a swine nutritionist that works with customers in the field. So I'm going to cover some of the basics of a farm visit and kind of get some highlights of what I do to prepare, conduct, and then follow up with farm visits. And one thing I want to reiterate or mention is that I'm a swine nutritionist and we're going to have some swine-centric portions of this, but the basics of the preparation and the follow-up and some of the things that the animal tells you don't matter which species it is. Preparing for a good farm visit doesn't change, except some of the technicalities. If you're going to a dairy farm, you're going to visit a sheep flock or go through a quad barn like I would. So open your eyes, open up to what I'm saying, that it can apply to anything, and it also could apply to normal interactions outside of just a farm visit. So what I'm going to cover today are preparing for your farm visits, primarily on the objectives of what that visit's going to do. We'll talk about some of the steps in conducting the farm visit, from expectations to scope and review, and then talk a little bit about the follow-up. Now, as we prepare for a farm visit, we need to determine why we're making a visit. Now, when I'm making a visit, I'm coming in as the expert on swine nutrition. If you're making a farm visit in your role as maybe a sales professional, that could be part of your normal account maintenance that you service that you provide your customer. We could also have a farm visit that is in response to a challenge. We have a problem with the feed. We have some sick animals. We've got a challenge with performance. That would be more of an acute crisis response. The other one that we've been involved in is you've got a customer that's thinking about expanding and wants somebody else to look at the operation, kind of give their ideas on what they see as expansion plans, where they can do it, and kind of be a sounding board if their expansion plans make sense. So that's a valued resource that is probably outside of the scope of your job, but it's something that a trusted customer might ask you to do. And the last one, the customer might be testing you. And we'll hit on that in a little bit. As we prepare for the farm visit, we're going to talk about who will be involved, some of the groundwork and the history and the expectations of that farm call. So as I mentioned, when we're talking about a maintenance, it's just a checkup on how things are doing. In my case, it could be a quarterly visit to a sow unit, could be a semi-annual visit to a grow finish site. And those usually don't take as much preparation because you know about that operation ahead of time because it's a maintenance. In response to a challenge, this could be a really difficult situation to be in. You know, the customer could call and say, I've got sick pigs and it's your fault, come find out why. Or we could have some poor performance. We could have environmental challenges. These types of farm visits usually involve more than just you and the customer, and they could involve more than just one visit, and the follow-up might take more than just a typical report. Now, as I mentioned on expansion plans, this is a type of farm visit where you get to be a resource to your customer that's outside the scope of your job, and they're trusting you to be open and share your ideas and what you see with them. This could apply to add in a barn. It could be changing their manure storage. It could be all kinds of expansion. But I've been involved in a few of these over the years, and these are fun kind of farm calls because they're what ifs, and you get to spend somebody else's money. So I was on a farm call 2 weeks ago, and he said, "We're probably going to spend $12 million on the sow unit. What do you think?" Like, oh, cool. I can spend $12 million.
Let's put all the bells and whistles in.
That's totally, yeah. And the last one is testing you. You'll have customers that'll challenge your credibility, and it doesn't matter if you're in your first job out of school, or if it's your first visit as a PhD or veterinarian. You do have some customers that will be jerks and will ask you to come in a situation and either won't tell you everything that's going on or will hold information back as a way for you to prove your credibility. And this is a type of farm call or farm visit, even a sales call, that you need to be cautious in. And unfortunately, I can't tell you how to deal with it, other than if your spidey sense is giving you a tingly that something's not right, then open your eyes and open your ears a little bit more beyond what the animals and what you're told you're there for.
Yeah.
Casey?
No, I agree. I was going to ask Steve. He's made a lot of sales calls, more so. How the portions that he went through, these 4 different types, Steve, what is the percentage you spend in maintenance, new sales, testing you, expansion? From your standpoint, you talked a lot, you help your producers with business too.
Sure. Can you hear me all right?
Yeah. Is there anything we're missing there, or your time spent there?
No, I think that's good. Just like Jim said, any time there are feed issues or perceived feed issues, those are not good situations, and you have to have your ducks in a row. I've been very fortunate that I haven't had a lot of them, but there's always potential for it. And so you have to be investigative with that. But 99.9% of my time is spent on either prospecting or servicing current accounts. And I probably, this is just a side note, I probably over service my current accounts. And sometimes that cuts into how much prospecting.
Mhm. And kind of where I thought Jim was going to go with his expansion plans was, are you prospecting or expanding business? In there is kind of
Yeah.
when you titled that, but
Well,
yeah,
expanding business, yeah. I mean, one thing is if you're working with really good accounts like I get to and Jim gets to, a lot of those guys are growing, or folks are growing, and so you do get involved with that. You become a trusted advisor on that farm.
Yeah, and I put expansion plans, and this could be business discussion.
Yeah.
So this would be kind of the catch-all category. And you're right, Steve. When you become a trusted partner, I remember a sales call I had in Iowa last November, and it was just me and and the customer. It's a father talking about expansion, wondering if he should be in the pig industry anymore. We went through. We were there for 4 hours, and we were just talking. And so that's one of those. I didn't sell him a thing. We didn't.
Yeah.
There wasn't another truck that came, but we continued that rapport, and I gave him some ideas to think about of talking about contracts, expanding, keeping. So it's the trusted business partner, as you mentioned, Steve.
Yeah. Well, one thing, Jim, I mentioned to Casey when we were talking about this program, I talked about if I could go back and do some things in school, I probably would have taken a few more business classes. You just touched on something, Jim, that I can honestly tell you came up yesterday. And I've worked with this farm for 15 years. I had to play psychologist. And that's where I think you're going with that, Jim.
Yep.
And you have to get beyond. Now, this is not, farm call 101. I mean, this is a lot of years of experience, but sometimes you have to, and this is another thing I said to Casey, you have to be really good at listening.
We're going to hit on that.
Yes, sir. Okay. Don't want to jump too far ahead.
Yeah.
But that's critical, and listening and the empathizing with, the swine business is up and down, the monogastric business is up and down. We're headed towards 6 years of negative markets in the dairy industry. You think these guys are really excited to go to the barn every day? It's not fun.
Yeah. Well, as we continue to about preparing for your farm visit,
Yeah.
if you're doing a farm visit that's going to be just a maintenance one, then there's not who involved is like, okay, is it going to be Casey and the production manager and me, like a typical one? If it's a response to a challenge, it would behoove you to know who's going to be there ahead of time.
Yes.
So that you can prepare yourself for personalities, what questions they might ask, just so you aren't ambushed by something. That's all I'll say there. And then knowing who's there will allow you to prepare your objectives. Will you be in charge of the visit? Will the customer? Will the consulting nutritionist? Or are you just another resource to walk along, give your input? And then as a young professional, this is a place where you can watch for opportunities to be a leader in the farm visit. You could be led by the veterinarian, but there will be times in that farm call where it'll come the time for you to input from your expertise as whether it's feed or management. So watch for those opportunities where you could be more than just a lackey walking along taking pictures and looking at pigs or cows.
But I would just say on that a little bit is I know several times you have a PowerPoint presentation put together, and this is what you want to talk about. But if you're doing active listening that Steve mentioned and asking the right questions, you better be able to pivot off of that presentation into another one. And I've seen technical salespeople or service people really fail at that. If you get them flustered, they miss an opportunity to lead, but they also miss an opportunity to sell or gain credibility, right? Because if you're talking about something that doesn't fit that farm's challenges today, and I don't care if it's a Smithfield or it's, somebody with 200 sows, it's the same. If you come in there with a presentation that doesn't fit their needs, your credibility goes out the window.
Yeah, and I call that's reading the room.
Mm-hmm.
And the other one is the data puke. And we as technical people or salesmen with a plan of a new product, we want to spit out all the data. I got all this great thing, but you have to be able to say, not today. And that takes listening and reading the room. One of the things that I continue to be frustrated with, and I think you'll probably run into this too, Steve, is inadequate groundwork before the meeting. Of course, depends on your history with the farm. The farm you're talking about, Steve, you have 15 years experience. If you have somebody come in, you'll be able to rattle off their production history, their components. For sure. But if I'm coming into a new one, we need some basics so we're not ambushed. So we need to know the genetics. We need to know the system basics, whether they're freestall, tie stall, are they using robotic milkers, are they wean to finish, farrow to finish, are they using a nursery finish program? Have an idea of the building basics. And from my standpoint as a nutritionist, I want to know who the veterinarian is, who the veterinarian is employed by. That kind of gives me an idea of the type of medicine or protocol I'll see when I get there. And then understanding, if you can, production, health history, financial history if it's needed. And from your standpoint as a professional, is what's our sales history to them and what's their sales history of the product that they're selling. So that's just some groundwork that kind of gives you an idea of what the farm is doing before you even walk in the door. And the other thing, this gives you an opportunity to clarify with the customer what you've been told. And this is a nice way for you to build more rapport. You could say, well, Steve, Casey told me that your components have been 3.5 to 3.6% butter fat over the whatever. Are you comfortable with that? I mean, that gives you a chance to delve in there and provide credibility and say, whoa, wow, he kind of has an idea of what's going on before he even looks at the cow.
Absolutely. And then, obviously in the middle of all that, you have that goal of, you might already know, I would hope that you already know that you're going to be selling calf feed or, in your case, a nursery product or something like that. But then, you may be able to, like Casey said, pivot during the meeting. If you're asking the right questions, you'll know where the opportunities become.
Yes. So and the next slide I think fits really well with that, Steve, where we want to know the current situation, health, labor, whatever it is today. We want to know why we're there in detailed terms, and we want to have clarification on what's the expectation of the visit. Put it in their world. You want them to say, I want you to help me with this. We want a plan to do this. I'm hoping you can offer suggestions for this. So that's where the questions come in and say, what do you expect from me beyond what I think is the plan today? So then you get buy-in. And this is where you can help with the gotcha or credibility sales call or farm visits. You put some onus upon them, maybe break down some of that gotcha attitude, and it allows you to use your listening skills to hopefully not get into one of those gotcha sales calls. And then to delve in further on, the more you know ahead, the better the farm visit will go. But there are some cautions with this. There are times you need to go in blind. If you're, like Steve brought up, you got a feed problem. Sometimes it's better to just go in blind and not be jaded or biased with what you see. But you still need basic information, but you don't want to make too many assumptions in some of these calls before ahead of time. Would that agree with what you've seen in your tech career, Casey?
Yeah, I'm going to make
Yeah.
this comment when I interviewed with Aki Nutrition. This is a long time ago. I didn't get the job. I absolutely failed the interview, by the way. But he kept asking me, why didn't you ask them what they did before and, in situation stuff? And while I'd say like you, I hope I have that knowledge, but I've also was naive to think that salesmen are going to give me that knowledge or I have any indication of the history of that farm going in. But also, like you said, just because they said they did this doesn't mean they did it, right? And so if I'm not on the farm, and sometimes I don't even like asking the supervisor or the production manager, I want to go talk to the people. I have enough barn experience that I can walk in the barn and tell you if somebody says what they're doing and what really is being done, because those sometimes, I think that's where the blinder is too, that don't have this preconditioned notion of what you're going to do or what's really going on, because you may find a totally another problem that caused your problem of why you're there.
Oh yeah. And then just be cautious on the test you visit. That happens regardless of where you are in your career. So that's the last to say on that one. And then, so now we'll kind of go into talking about how you conduct this farm visit. And I'll try and speak in general terms, but we'll have some swine specific comments in here. All right. This is really important from my standpoint as a swine nutritionist. You have to follow the farm's biosecurity protocols. If they say 72 hours away from pigs, don't go to the county fair the day before. That's a cardinal rule that we need to follow. And I'm sure it applies to some of the high health calf farms that you might be working with too.
And I'm just going to say that if you're a monogastric on the swine side, you better not own pigs. You better respect that. And if you're working on the poultry side, like I worked for AB Vista, we were not allowed at all or to own poultry. You need to respect that. You need to respect biosecurity. It's the same with different cattle diseases or anything. If you're on a farm previous with a disease, respect that to say, hey, I can't go to the next farm. This guy broke out with something. I just don't think it's smart to shift herds or to even move that around.
Yeah, so that's a good point, Casey. Not all farm visits involve being in the barn. And if you can't be in the barn, instead of saying I can't visit, you'd say, can we visit off-site?
Yeah.
Discuss over lunch what your challenges are, and then I'll plan to come for a walkthrough when I'm clean. So we're going to go over walking through barns, what to look at on a pig farm, using your senses, questions, and then talk about summarizing your visit. So what to look at on a pig farm. My first rule of thumb in every barn I visit is let the pigs tell me their story. They are better at telling you what's going on in their barn than the owner, the manager, and the guy that does chores. And one of the things that I am adamant about is you do not enter a room like a bull in the china shop. This is really tough to do when you're walking through the barn with 3 or 4 or 5 other people. But when you walk into a pig room, let's think about a quad barn. You've got 4 separate rooms there. Get dressed, walk in, keep your conversation low. Don't turn any lights on other than the lights that are in there for ambient. Look through the window, see what you see with those pigs. Then you open the door nice and quietly, and you listen, and you watch. You could hear pigs coughing. You could hear pigs snoring. You could hear pigs eating. You could look through, and you're not going to see every pen, but you're going to get a general idea of the comfort of those pigs. If they're up and running around, acting uncomfortable before you turn the lights on, then there might be something going on. If you hear the feeders being slapped, you might have a feed outage problem. But let the pigs tell you, and be quiet and observe. And once you've got that door open and you're kind of listening, then you can turn the lights on and walk in. And once you turn the lights on, game's off. The pigs are running around, they're huffing, they got woken up. But start out with to take advantage of the pigs doing what the pigs doing before you interrupt them.
And Steve, I would say that's probably the same with cows, right? I mean, because they're flight or fight type of thing, and sometimes even if you go in and really abrupt them, a lame sow or a lame cow will hide it, right? Because that's kind of the predatory mentality, that if you scare them or abruptly, that you may not see something that's really there.
For sure. A few years ago, I was doing a farm tour that was not it was a farm that our company was working with, but I wasn't working with them on a routine basis. Several of us put disposable boots on, and it was the first time ever that a dairyman asked me, take those off, we'll disinfect your shoes. They scare my cows, and I could not disagree with them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So yeah, that I really like that. Animal husbandry across the species, it's all the same. The calmer you are, the more information you're going to get from them.
Mm-hmm. So now the next one is, what do you look at it on a pig farm? This is just a short list. You can. It depends on why you're there. What you need to do is look at the general condition of the animals, the general condition of the environment, and then if there's problems that the pigs are telling you or the cows are telling you, then you can back up and look at the specifics. So if you've got a poor body condition on the pigs, they look railed up, gannoned up, they got they're high in their flank, then you might have a sickness going through, or you might have some feeder problems. So it's a flow chart. Let the pig tell you what's happening, and then you find out why the pig is showing you what's happening. If you walk in and the pigs are piled up on top of each other, you've either got a temperature or you got a ventilation problem. Then you could, if the pigs are spread out with laying the ground just nice and comfortable, then you could probably check off temperature and ventilation from any challenges in there. So this is where you use your senses. And then the one that Steve brought up is on this slide. Questions. The more you get more out of asking than from stating what you see. So instead of saying, it feels awful drafty in here, what did the fans say? Ask a question. Do you feel a draft here? What's the setting on that baffle? Or what's the set point on your fans? Or do these pigs feel hungry to you? How do you adjust this type of feeder? I'm not familiar with this type of feeder. The same thing can be said walking through a freestall barn. Why are those cows not sitting in their stall the way everybody else is? Can you give me some insight in the way those cows are acting? And you can turn that into, well, that's old number 94. She never sits in her stall right. But it gets buy-in from the farm personnel that you're working with as to you're not stating, you're asking. And if you ask those questions, like Casey mentioned, you'll go from thinking I'm going down this road to, oh, we need to go down here because of what he's telling me.
Well, I also think your list is really interesting, Jim. A lot of us go into nutrition because we love nutrition. I'm so fascinated with nutrition. This microbe and this mRNA and this genetic sequence, we change these bugs. Your list has ag engineering on there. What else do we have on there? Veterinarian health. So if you can go back one slide.
Air quality, water management.
Quality. Yeah. Are you guys learning about this stuff? Are you studying some of that? Are you getting in the barns to know what we're talking about on there? Feed pan coverage and stuff. If you don't feed them right, doesn't matter what great nutrition product you give them. And if you're never going to be more of a farm visit and you're going to do technical that I did like at AB Vista and DSM and things, if you can talk this stuff in meetings like that, you command respect. This is not just stuff you need to know for the farm visit. It doesn't matter you're in an executive office presenting on a new phytase. If you can talk this language, you get credibility. You have no clue what ventilation should be or any of that, you're gonna find the wrong problem in the barn.
Yep. So here's some of the tools that you use. There's a hygrometer, there's a camera, there's a laser infrared temperature. We got a smoke bomb to test ventilation, and an anemometer to test wind speed. There's a 1 gallon measuring device so you could measure water flow with notebook. But here you got your eyeballs, your nose, and your ears. Those are just some of the tools that we could use to test the environment. So it's not just all about the tools, it's about looking at everything you have. I will say one caution: there are some farms that have cell phone and photography policies, so ask beforehand before you take your cell phone or a camera into a farm. Some of them might say yes and others might say no, but ask that ahead of time. And I guess this would go with the fiber box and looking at manure puddles, right, Steve?
Sure. Yep. We have everything from the Penn State shaker box to I have samples. That's one of the reasons I was traveling this morning, pulling samples on a dairy. Then you have to forward those to a laboratory that you're working with on a routine basis, as well as all the other things. I mean, the ventilation side of things, you're going to have some of the same things that you're talking about. I think that's a great point with regards to the camera thing. I always ask, unless it's somebody that I've worked with, like the 15-year dairy. I mean, that's one thing, but everywhere else, you definitely would want to there's just too many things going on there that can, with social media and things like that can reach out and bite you.
Yeah, and to play onto that, Steve, you have to use your common sense. If you run upon
Absolutely.
a situation in the barn that shouldn't be photographed, don't photograph it.
Exactly.
So to summarize, then you summarize your visit before you leave the farm, and this applies to sales calls, farm visits, is sit down and take notes amongst the participants, especially if you're on an issue-oriented farm visit. Address any critical issues you see. You could be called into the farm for, hey, we got broken bones. But we find feeder management issues or ventilation issues, then we address those critical issues at that moment instead of putting in a report and then hoping somebody that reads the report. If there's something that is critical to animal welfare, it needs to be addressed at that meeting, not later. And then we need to set expectations for the follow-up. Is who's going to write the report? What type of report is it going to be? Do we need to schedule any additional visits? Do we need to get more resources in here to address the challenge? Or is it just, we just leave it and we'll come back in a quarter and see if things get better? But we need to set those expectations before you leave so that you don't get in a situation where, like, well, Dr. Smith never sent a report and, well, Casey was going to do it. But I assumed it Casey, and Casey assumed I was going to do it. So set those expectations before you leave the farm.
Jim, I'm going to interject there. As for the most part, a sales professional, from my standpoint, it's your responsibility. If you're the one that's trying to gain their business, it's your responsibility. And if somebody else is going to help you with that follow-up, do exactly what you just said. Make sure those expectations are put into place, and then you're the one that needs to follow up with them, because at the end of the day, it's your tail on the line, to make sure that that's all done.
So as we talk about follow-up, if you are charged with writing a report or a summary, be concise and factual. This is not a piece of literature. Just state the facts of what you saw. You don't be careful with making any conclusions. Just state it factually, and that way you don't put something on paper that might lead somebody to make a different impression than what you meant. Make sure that you follow the more compliments than bad things. 2 or 3 compliments to one deficiency, unless you were brought in as the expert in a specific deficiency. If you're brought in as the expert to address an issue, then you have free license to hit any softball you got, because you're there as the expert to address that one issue, if it's deemed that you can do that. Sometimes when you're brought in as the expert, you don't need to be soft about it. If there's something wrong, you need to hit on it. But that depends on if you're being brought in as the expert. And make sure that you offer a remedy for anything you find is a deficiency. So if you say feeder management sucks, and don't put it that way, but you have poor feeder management in there, offer a remedy. I can provide you with laminated copies of the K-State feed pan coverage for your workers to use. That would be a nice remedy that gives a solution to help in that case. If you come in and say, I think we have the lameness problem, you can get the laminated copies of the Zinpro lamination index that talks about how the arch on the back of the cow, and give that to the farm to share with their workers. So give some remedies for the deficiencies, so you're just not saying what's bad. And then we need to offer a revisit to the farm to see if the remedies that we offered worked and in an appropriate amount of time. So if we have a hoof problem and we're going to implement the use of some amino acid linked trace minerals, that's going to take several months to remedy. So don't schedule a follow-up sales or farm visit in 2 weeks, because you're not going to see any changes. But if you have a problem with feeder management, a follow-up sales call in 2 weeks is probably appropriate. Then you can see, oh, hey, are we adjusting these feeders better? Are the pigs more happy? Are they eating better? So to summarize, we went over how to prepare for the farm visit. Ask questions so that you know what the objectives of the farm visit are. Ask questions about what the basics of the farm are, so that you're not surprised when you go there, as if you're brought in as an expert. The genetics. If you go to a farm and they're all jerseys and you're expecting to see big black and whites, then you didn't prepare well. When you conduct a farm visit, make sure that you have expectations for that farm visit or sales call. The scope of the visit. Are we going to just sit at the restaurant and talk about production records that we get from MetaFarm, or are we going to actually go in the barns? When you walk the barns, make sure that you let the animals tell you what's happening in the barns. Ask questions when you're in the barn. And Casey, you brought up a really good point. The manager and the owner know what should happen. The fella that walks in the barn every day knows what happens. So don't ignore them. And if you have the opportunity to sneak off, and the guy that's following the group just because he does chores, go back in there and say, hey, here's what I'm asking this question. Hey, how do you like doing chores in this barn? Can you tell me how you do chores every morning? Mm-hmm. Because you get so much more out of that, because the owner could say, well, we do chores before 7 a.m. every morning. We never have any feed outages. And the last time we had our generator checked was last week. And the worker goes, dude, our generator doesn't work. I think the curtain drop works, and we ran out of feed 2 days ago.
Well, I was going to say something we didn't put in there what to prepare. You better know if you're going to have a lunch visit or a farm visit, and some of us need to dress appropriately. And well, I can say that for both men and women, right? But ladies' heels and farm visits do not work.
Yeah, no, they don't. Yeah, and then as you're finishing up the farm visit, review what you saw, review expectations for a report, and then review the plan for follow-up. And then in your follow-up, write your report, make it concise and accurate. It's not a piece of literature. It's a technical piece, and make plans to revisit the farm if it's needed.
Awesome. Great insights. So now I'm going to turn it, turn it over to Steve, because we've had a good conversation of, I think, things that Steve needs to discuss on the ruminant side that we all need to hear. So,
sorry about the little bit of background. I noticed that I had to put my I'm in my vehicle, as Casey mentioned, because I was pulling samples this morning, and then I'm headed to a lunch meeting, so I'm kind of in between. But one of those comments that was made, in the vehicle, you spend a lot of time in the vehicle, so I continue to listen to podcasts and different things that may Casey's encouraged me to listen to her podcast, so I need to start doing that, right, Casey?
Yep.
So, but I've been doing this a long time, and so as far as I want to make sure that
You're breaking up, Steve. Are you there?
Can you hear me?
Yeah. You're just frozen on your video. So
okay. Oh, sorry. Let me set my phone. I'm connected. Can you see me now?
Mm-hmm.
We good?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So, but just to jump ahead, I at the end of the day, sales calls and business, it doesn't really matter whether you're doing monogastric. There's those nuances. My favorite new word of the day, but differences between monogastric calls or ruminant calls. Some of those nuanced parts of it are that we would add on top of that is the attire. So I'm glad you brought that up. That was one of my notes. Yesterday in Michigan, it was warmer than it had been in a while, but it was so cold out on dairies. It was just terrible. I was as cold as I'd been all year long yesterday. Okay. So you definitely have to, in that situation, you're probably going to be wearing Carhartts or some type of coveralls, insulated, and then always obviously having clean boots, and being able to sanitize those boots. So, I'm on a daily basis, I'm just out there looking for opportunities. Just a few side notes. I work in everything from direct farm sales to a nutrition work to also then leveraging relationships that I have built over the years, and working with some private consultants. The dairy business is really headed in a direction of a lot of private consultants. So, sometimes I'm also headed in that direction of trying to meet with private consultants and see how I can then help them add value on the farm. And it may be through products, it may be through some added value things that I could do, and stuff like that. The biggest thing is leveraging those relationships that you need to build, and those don't just happen. Okay. Some of them go back to school, And then some of them go through some training programs. If you're working for a company like Kent Feeds, they have training programs. You meet other people, in that situation.
Steve, talk about technical person on here. You have a master's degree. Talk about going into sales as a technical person, because I think what Jim talked about, what you talked about, what we do is maybe different roles in the farm call, but really it's still technical what we talk about from a business standpoint, from a nutrition standpoint. You're still technical going in there, regardless if you're sales or not.
It is. The tricky part about that is knowing all the technical aspects, also being willing to learn. I've been doing this for a long time, and every day I'm learning. I learned things yesterday that I was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I just learned that. Constantly, it's just always, that part of it is always evolving. So the reason you get into technical sides of animal science or whatever is because you have this desire to learn, and you have this desire to share that with other people. You just have to be, like Jim was talking about, you have to be a little cautious about, how much just spew it out in a sales call, if we're going to relate it to a sale, because it's pretty easy. I'm probably not as technical as some guys. I mean, you say I have a master's. I've met PhDs that are really, really smart. And I've met people that had a high school diploma that were well studied, well read, really had experience. And back when I was working in the supplier world, I would be afraid, and I would spend almost a day studying and making sure that I had all my ducks in a row before I went to meet with them, because they would challenge me the most. Okay. So, technical, you'd be surprised. Some of those people that work on the farm are going to challenge you as much as the owner, maybe more.
So people getting their masters or PhDs shouldn't be scared of technical sales, in my opinion.
Absolutely not. I would encourage it. I don't know how this will change. Other people have different opinions from me. But I think today, everything from a veterinarian to a master's or a PhD are going to continue to be a desired resource for companies. More companies continue to look for advanced degrees. I don't want it to sound, once again, I want to make sure everyone that's on this call understands, have that. Okay. Your personal desires, goals. But I do feel like I have gotten jobs because I had a master's degree. Okay.
The master's degree is the new bachelor's degree.
And once again, I'm not going to get into the opinions of
educational dilemmas. We do.
There could be some arguments about that.
Yeah.
But
I do have a question in from Claire. And I think both of you could answer this, because I think Steve would agree that we have to ask the people working on the farm versus just the owner sometimes. How is it best to talk with an employee about potential problems without thinking you're making the owner think you're trying to go behind their back?
Oh, that's a really good one. So I recently just had that situation about a month ago. I learned way more about what was going on that farm, and this was a prospect, so I want to be clear about that. So in the situation with a prospect, and then the employee tells you information that you had no clue about, I can honestly tell you I did not share what that employee told me. I just put it in my notes, put it in the back of my head. It'll get addressed in a different way than the employee said that to me. Now, that employee had been there for 20 plus years. So from that standpoint, it was a trusted employee, very dedicated employee. What you find is those employees are, in many situations, just as vested in the animal husbandry on that farm as the owner. Okay. So a lot of times they tell you this because they're not telling you because they want to stir something up. They're telling you because they're passionate about what they're doing. So then you have to be really cautious, Casey, just like you said, about how you share that with the owner, for sure.
Well, then, Casey, I run against this when I come in on some of these challenge farm visits, and usually you have 5 or 6 people that walk into the barn, the owner and the manager and the veterinarian or somebody else. There'll be a time when those 2 or 3 people are talking that you could
step
politely
away.
excuse yourself from that conversation and walk 2 pens down and talk to the worker. And it's no big deal. In that case, I mean, he's part of the group. You're talking to him. Don't always get caught up in all the banter among the experts. Go.
No,
In that case, it's okay.
I
And you're not going behind his back because he sees you talking to him. And if that worker was not supposed to be there, he wouldn't be there.
exactly. And usually that stuff, like that case, Jim, I may bring that up in the follow-up summary meeting after we're not in the barn anymore about, this doesn't match what's really going on here. And then I kind of put it in my report. But like what Steve said, that's insider knowledge that you have to trust and keep it in the back of your head. And like you said, find a creative way to address it. So if he was worried about cow body condition or welfare concern, that is a tough line. Wherever it came from,
Yeah.
either you visually seeing it, but at least on the pork side, if you're Pork Quality Assurance Plus and you see a animal abuse, you are required to report it. You have to report it to that owner, no matter who you saw, who told you, whatever. And I'm an advisor, so I train people for that certification. And that's what I try to remind people is that we took that, program, we signed that paper, we are required to report that. Now, that doesn't mean you don't tell the farm owner and you go to the press and say there's animal abuse or something here. But you, as an expert or industry professional, have to address those situations. And at least Pork Quality Assurance gives you the avenue that it's okay to do that. But you also have to be cautious that you don't ruin your relationship or make a big deal out of something that's not a big deal.
Yeah.
That's probably the better point, Casey. You do have to understand, and you trust your training a little bit and say, hey, really, is this a big deal that I need to, if it's a prospect situation, do I want to jeopardize, another farm visit or another call to this place, over something fairly, minuscule, or is it a big deal?
Mm-hmm. All right. Do we have any other questions? Steve?
I got one directly.
Okay.
That is, what if you are challenged with questions and issues that you are not an expert or that are not your expertise? That's really easy. Say, I do not know the answer. I will get the answer for you. If they're asking something that's out of your realm, don't start answering and getting yourself in trouble.
No.
And that goes at the test too, that you talked about, credibility. It's okay to say you don't know.
It is okay, but it is the toughest thing, guys. It is the toughest thing to say, I don't know, because you're right in the middle of, as a new professional, you're right in the middle of trying to gain their respect and build rapport with them. It is not an easy thing to say, I don't know, but it's the smartest thing you can do.
Well, Casey, I have an illustration of that. We had a large customer that we had gained their business, and we had been feeding their pigs for a year and a half. And in the conversation, it came out that they were having challenges with their insurance company on a claim. And so I said, well, what's your challenge? Well, they had an employee that chose not to include an ingredient in the VTM table because he didn't like carrying 50-pound bags up the stairs. That led to bone problems, loss of carcass, And the insurance company was relying upon this expert that they found, and the expert was not an expert. And they said, well, can you write that report for me, or can you help me with that? I said, no, I cannot help you, but I know 2 or 3 people that I'll ask and see if they'll do it. So I hooked them up with a friend of mine that's a professional that's well respected. He wrote a report and got him like a $2 or $3 million settlement. And that's just saying, I can't do it. I don't have the answer, but I got him one. So you can, I mean, that's a huge example, but if you say I don't know, but you get them an answer, that's more credible than giving them a BS answer and getting in trouble.
And that is why the follow-up is probably, to me, more important sometimes than prep or the farm visit. I mean, prep's very important, but follow-up. If you say you're going to do something, you better do it. And you better do it in a timely manner. Not 2 weeks later and give them some excuse that, you know, my child was sick, I had this or that. If you said you're going to get it done, 2 weeks for a farm is not an acceptable turnaround.
Casey, Jim just made a comment about, I think it was a $12 million sow unit. These are not little businesses, guys. So, you know, these people have a lot riding on what they're doing.
Yes, they do.
A dairy today is $20 million. It's a lot of dough.
All right, we have a few more minutes. Any last minute questions? We're going to have to start picking on some people. Edward, you're really good at coming up with some good thoughts.
Well, somebody asked that question because I was about to ask about, so I always admit that I don't know everything, but I'm willing to look into this issue. But what if like Jim said, like some people will come to you on purpose, right? They challenge you on purpose. And even if I said, I don't know, like still they don't get their answer. They feel like you are disqualified. And how can a young professional like handle this kind of issue, you know?
That's a good question, because when you come out with a master's or a PhD or even a DVM and you're on the farm, you're expected to be the expert. And you just have to have enough to say, you can even say, hey, I wasn't trained on that in my grad program. I will reach out to Casey Bradley, who I know is an expert in phytase, and get an answer for you. I mean, it's tough because you want to be the expert, and just if you can't do it, if you can't answer the question there, say you can't answer the question.
But here, Edward, here goes the also point that I think we need to address some of the elephant in the room is be prepared. And if you're working with a salesman like Steve, he better not put you in a situation to make you fail. And so understanding who you're going to work for, that training program, understand the products, understanding the customers that you're going to work with. But if you're working for a good company, hopefully they're not going to put you in a situation to make you fail. And, you know, Rick Baldus, I don't know, Steve, do you still report to Rick?
I do.
Yeah. One of the best guys to train young people. And he put me on certain accounts. We won a lot of business, but we didn't go in as Casey's the master expert. Casey's really good at some things. And he was a great salesman to help me learn how to listen, ask the right questions. He set me up for success. And I think you have to ask him those in interview questions to say, how are you going to set me up for success? I know I don't know everything. I just studied X, Y, and Z in school. I'm a finisher expert, you know, understand the business and how they're going to make you successful. But it goes to some other points is you better be studying more than just your research project, right? As I mentioned, ventilation, pig management. If you're not in the barns, even if it's a small scale university, if you're not in there just helping doing chores, you don't know what goes on or what it takes, right? If you only ever worked in a lab for most of your degree, come out and weigh some 1,300 pigs with me after a day. You're going to know what it's like to why people don't want to do that extra work that you think should be done.
Casey, you just brought up a point that actually I was literally just going to tell Edward the same thing, or anybody on this call that doesn't have all the practical experience. I am not on one, if it was a dairy situation, a ruminant situation, I'm not on one farm that isn't looking for help. Okay. Go get a weekend job for a few hours. Go feed some calves. Go walk some cows. Go help push some cows. You know, you can do that monogastric side too. That would be the first thing. You will get more credibility out of that than anything.
And I think this goes without saying, and I don't have it, but learn Spanish.
Yeah.
That'll help you be able to talk to the people that are doing the work more than anything we probably told you today.
Probably.
Yeah.
I have a comment on top of what Jim just said. There was a really nice article on National Hog Farmer about whether you should learn Spanish or not. But the key is communication with English speakers and non-English speakers. Yep. I think that's a really good read for me.
Yeah. And I think that goes into with this group. We are a global group, learning more than languages and expecting that everybody understands what you're telling them, even in English, from a Yankee down to South. Lingo is different. Or I'm talking to somebody in Ireland versus the US. It's different. So make sure you ask questions to that your customers understand what you're asking them or telling them. Reaffirm what they've learned, what you heard.